Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next episode on stewardship here for the Archdiocese of San Antonio. You may remember we've also been talking a lot about the traditional way of looking at stewardship, looking at time, of talent, of treasure. But there's another way for us to look at stewardship that I'm looking at also with some of the lay people of our Archdiocese. Julie Seguin is one who has been very involved in stewardship for our Archdiocese for many years, and now for her parish that she's in now. And the new way that they're proposing looking at stewardship, or that we're hearing about, is through prayer, participation, and generosity. And so today we're going to be speaking a little bit about the topic of generosity, and just kind of talking a little bit about how that change in verbiage may affect how we think about stewardship, but also what generosity can look like in our lives and in our involvement in our parish. So Ms. Julie, you've dealt a lot with the older verbiage, time, talent, treasure. Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts with those newer ways of understanding it with prayer, participation, generosity? What were your thoughts that came to mind when you heard those newer titles being used?
You know, we've always used the word generosity along with time, talent, and treasure. But the new words of prayer, participation, and generosity, I think, as an extension of the time, talent, and treasure. It puts it a little bit more into perspective and into action, mm-hmm. because to be generous is to be a disciple of Jesus, and yes. to be like Jesus, to be generous with our time, generous with our prayer, generous with presence, generous with present, putting a gift into the basket. So I think that the new wording, if you want to call it that, I think it's more active, and it's a better way of looking at how we can be good Christian stewards, how we can be good disciples, and to be more like Christ.
Yeah, and I think it really focuses us a little bit more. It kind of pulls our attention tighter to this understanding that our stewardship is an offering that we're giving.
Absolutely.
It turns more from I won't call it the introverted, but the internal reflection, I think. Outward. With time, talent, treasure, it's more focused in. Mm-hmm. When you're looking at prayer, participation, generosity, it's a focus out, because yes. generosity in and of itself is meant to be something that is given. It's really not something for myself. It's that I'm giving something to somebody else.
Yes.
It makes me think about discussions I've had with other priests, that the way they work with those who are homeless or on the side of the road, that they keep a little bit of a certain amount of money on their sun visor. Yes. And they just use that as their way of discussing, and when someone's in need, they hand. Yeah. They give.
Yeah.
And I think that generosity calls them to reflect in a much different way their connection in the wider world. Treasure, I guess, can have been, to some degree, I guess, for younger generation, they think of Lord of the Rings. And right. They think of dragons and that kind of stuff. Treasure is mine.
Yes.
And so I have to find a way to give from what is mine mm-hmm. to somebody else.
Yeah.
Generosity, I think, calls us to reflect on what actually belongs to me.
Yes.
Which is more scriptural, I would say. Because we're called to reflect on the fact that we're more stewards of gifts, more than we're custodians or keeping something that belongs to me.
Right, not storing it. Yeah.
Yes.
I think that as you look at generosity, and giving everything, look what Jesus did. He gave everything. He emptied himself out on the cross. And that's what he's asking for us, as good stewards. If we believe that as good stewards, everything we have is a gift from God, and we are to cultivate it and grow it, and then to give it back with justice. It's not ours. Yeah. So we're to give it back with justice and hope for anybody that is in need. But it's not just about giving our stuff, it's also about giving of our very selves. So if somebody is in need of just a smile, giving a smile is generous. That's an act of generosity. Or to say a prayer for someone in need, that's an act of generosity. It's an act of giving of ourselves. Yeah. And I think that, before you can become a very good steward, or any kind of a steward, I should say, you've got to have that conversion of heart. You've got to get to know Jesus. You've got to get to know Christ. You have to have a good prayer life. And that's one way, reading scriptures, that's how you're going to get to know God and know how to be like him and to be able to give back. And until that conversion comes, any kind of generosity is going to be more transactional. And it will be superfluous. And so I think that first part has to be that conversion that happens. And how can we be generous like God, or like Jesus, if we don't know him?
And I think it's important for us as we look at it as well, that this generosity calls us to be a part of something bigger. It's not just the bubble that I live in, but that it calls me to realize I'm a part of something much bigger.
Absolutely.
And I know we were discussing a little bit before beginning our video, you talked about how in order for generosity to really exist, it has to be done in the context of community, that we're a part of something bigger. Yes. And I know in our world right now, we've become very kind of polarized. We're separating in many different ways. Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, we're still desiring, I think, that sense of belonging to something.
Yeah.
And I remember back when my little sister was still very small and I was still in the seminary, I was driving her to school one day, and it probably was about this time of the year. We were on spring break more than likely, and I was driving her to school. And one of her cousins calls her on her cell phone, so I know she was old enough to have her phone, just for a few minutes, and then my sister hangs up, and very grouchily, she could have just texted me that.
Oh.
And then contrasting that then a few years later when COVID hits, that my sister, who very much preferred just text me, kind of antisocial to some degree, was still desiring that connection she missed, at least being able to be around friends, around people.
Yes.
And I think there's a part of all of us as humans, we are communal. We're called to be a part of something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And just like when you had your family, your kids or kiddos you raised, how did you inspire that connection with them to help them understand their connection, that they're a part of a larger community?
Well, gosh, you opened up a lot of things. Okay, so if you look at, let me try to answer all that. Okay, so I think in Scripture, in Genesis, God said man should not be alone. So right off the bat, we are communal. We're supposed to be together. We desire that. We crave that. We may not be able to name that craving, but that's what, besides God, we want to be with other people. But in Scripture, how many times do they call us the flock, sheep, the flock, the sheep? Have you ever watched sheep? They like connect to each other. If one gets away, if somebody takes one of them away, and like at the rodeo, they all want to be back together. They just want to be together. And that's what we are as people. We want to be together and be in community. And I think in a family, you build that through prayer, through giving each other responsibility, making the kids and the adults understand that I'm responsible for you. You're responsible for me. I'm responsible to feed you, to clothe you, and then I'm responsible to teach you how to take care of your room, take care of your things, take care of your faith, how to be a good friend. All of those things are about being good stewards and about being Christ-like, good Christians. So let's expand it even bigger into the parish. You want to talk about a parish? I mean, because that, I think, besides your family, is really your next place where you're going to have more of an emotional and faith-filled connection with people, because you're going to Bible studies, you're worshiping together. And I think as a member of a parish, we have responsibility to one another. We have a responsibility to come to Mass prepared. I always laugh when people say, I didn't get anything out of Mass. Well, when you went to a party, you probably took a shower, you picked out what you're wearing, you got all ready, you brought a gift, all of those things. You're coming to Mass to celebrate. It's a meal, and it's in your gathering. Did you read the Scriptures? Did you pick out what you're going to wear? Are you excited to be there? Did you greet your friends on the way in? So I think we, as Christians, need to be prepared and be responsible and to accept our ownership of the parish. Yeah. So now that we're here and we're worshiping, do we take care of it? Do we make sure our parish is clean? Are we giving money on a regular basis? Now online giving makes it so easy. You can put your online gift on there, weekly, and divide it out and give, and you don't even have to think about it. That way when you're on vacation, the church is still getting it. But we have to take ownership for the facilities, for taking care of our priests. I mean, I think all of those things, making sure that the worship is good. Do you have a talent or a gift that you can sing? Are you a good lector? Could you be a Eucharistic minister? Can you teach CCD or a religious ad? All of those things are part of being part of that community. and being a good steward in that community.
Yeah. And I think that focuses also on that topic of generosity that we've been on in regards to, sometimes we don't have a lot we can give.
No.
Maybe we're on a fixed income, or we're still a young adult or a kiddo,
Yeah.
and we don't have a lot of funds that we can give.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a kick out of here at Guadalupe. We started a children's collection the last couple of weeks.
Oh, that's great.
And it's fun to watch these little kids come running up. They brought them their own little envelopes they can use.
Yeah.
And you can hear the coins jingling as they're running up with their envelope. Or the kids are bringing their $1 or $2. They're usually getting that from mom and dad. That's mom and part of mom and dad's tithing is now divided a little bit to give their children something to bring forward.
Right.
But they still have something they can give.
Yes.
They still have their gifts that God has given to them. And I think this generosity topic, it overlaps a lot of the others because it speaks about more than just my financial gift.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think in our world right now, there's a lot of people that say, well, my finances are so tight, I can't do anything else. Well, sure you can. And you can still be involved in a parish community. It doesn't take much, like you said, to help sing in the choir, be an extraordinary minister. Easiest one that I've seen is an usher.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us are at least social enough that we can talk to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That we can say, welcome to the community. I love it, and I know you will too.
Yes.
And just greet someone at the door, hand them the book or the music sheets.
Yeah, say welcome.
Helping pick up little bits of stuff when we're walking out of the church. Our generosity also means that we make sure that what we've been giving towards is being respected.
Right.
And so if I'm walking out of the church and I see someone left a water bottle sitting in a pew, part of my generosity is recognizing I can pick that up.
Yes.
I can take care of this church.
Because it's my church. It's
Exactly.
You're right. It's my
I think
spiritual home.
so often they think that it's the priest church, but the priest moves.
Yeah.
At San Antonio, we usually aim for about 6 years and potentially up to 12 years for a priest to be in a parish. And that's a long time. We do leave a deep mark when we get that amount of time. But we're going to move. Yeah. Usually we hope that the laity, this becomes our second home.
Mm-hmm.
This becomes something that's deeply important to us. And you're going to potentially see priests come, priests go. But it's mine.
Yeah.
And so how I give generously to that speaks more than just of my funds. Yeah. It speaks of my lifestyle that I develop here that, I can come up. I have a parishioner that during Lent for the last couple of years, he said, I may not be able to give a lot, but I'm going to be down in the floodplain. I'll bring a saw and stuff. Yeah. And I'm going to be cleaning the floodplain because it's ugly. It's not as easy for people to come and see.
Right.
And that's become part of his generosity in giving back to the parish that he has come to love and that has invested in each other. Because I think that's where that generosity also works, is that we are investing in each other as parishioners.
Yeah.
That it's not just somewhere I sit, but I know who sits next to me potentially.
Yes.
I've always joked, as Catholics, we don't tend to move around a lot.
We all have our little spot in us.
We have our spot. And so have I invested enough and been generous enough to introduce myself to those people who are around me?
Yes.
To where we get to know each other and know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I know your family probably has done the same thing. You're at Holy Trinity, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And so you probably have kind of developed these connections and investments with the people in that community just as much as the building.
Yes. Well, you have, and as you go into Mass and you see people coming in, you can say, oh, I'm, this person or that person, and it's just nice to see them. And then if you don't see them for a while, then you might worry about them a little bit.
Yeah.
At the beginning of our Mass, now they have us all stand up and greet our neighbor, and then we sing our opening song. So that's a good way to actually say hello. And I always say my name to people, and so people will say it back. Generosity begets generosity. And so we're all, we should all try to be good examples of it, but really we need to do it to glorify God. But if you see somebody go and pick up the water bottle, or if you see somebody welcoming, or somebody welcomes you, you're more likely to adopt that attitude and take the smile to the next person that you meet. But I want to say one thing. I might contradict you a little bit. I'm sorry, Father.
That's okay.
But, we are called to give everything, just as God can. And we cannot outdo God in generosity.
Exactly.
So when people tell me they don't have any money to give, we're called to give prayer and time and and our finances, to be generous with everything. It's not one or the other. It's an all in.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's an act of trust. If we don't think we have enough money, we've got to trust in God that He will provide. And we need to be trusting and be able to make a gift. I think that's of our time and of our money.
Yeah. And I think that plays in scripturally. You have the story of the widow with the 2 coins.
Perfect example. Yes.
Jesus praises that she gave out of all that she had rather than out of her surplus.
Yes.
And I think that's when I hear people often talk about that they don't have something to give. It's they don't have the surplus to give from.
Right.
And so it's something for us to look deeper into, to realize that I can still give at least something out of what I have.
Yes.
And this topic of generosity is a beautiful one for us that calls us to look at a lifestyle.
Yes.
Not just a numbers game or something like that, but
yes,
how I live and exist as a Catholic, as a community, as a family, as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we come to the close of our video today, what I encourage you to reflect on is, how has generosity become something of a lifestyle for you? Because as Julie said, generosity begets generosity. The more generous I am, the more I encounter generosity around me. And I know I've always seen that in my own life, that when I'm willing to give, sometimes when I'm wondering if I can give that, God tends to repay it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for all of us, as we think about this episode, as we reflect on our generosity that we are able to offer back to God, as we reflect on what we can and should be giving back to God, that our hearts should be willing to trust enough that as I give, so God will also give back. And so I want to thank you for tuning in with us today. I hope you get a little bit out of our episodes, and it helps open your hearts. It opens your eyes a little bit to the potential and the need that all of us have to be connected and invested in what we truly have, taking ownership of a community. Mm-hmm. And I hope that you turn in to our next episode. Thank you for joining us today.
God bless.